guys, Miss Parnell here, back for the third video. So this is on section 4 and 5, social cognitive and the self. If you wrote these notes earlier, you probably had these all grouped together as section 3 of your notes, and that's fine. You don't need to change them. I just ended up breaking things up and putting them into 5 sections instead of 3, but everything's all the same. Again, this is the notes where I go pretty fast, so you don't have time to write stuff down. So if you need to do that, probably write it down, then come watch it, or just pause it as we go through. So first up is your definition you'll want to get. Social cognitive perspective views behaviors as influenced by the interaction between people's traits, which include their thinking, the cognitive part, and their social context. It's mainly associated with Albert Bandura. You'll remember him as the guy with the Bobo doll experiments. When we were talking about learning, he was, you remember there was classical conditioning, then there was operant conditioning, and then there was social learning. Imitation, observation, stuff like that. And that was him with the Bobo doll experiment, where the kids watched the adults either be mean or nice to the Bobo doll, and then that's how they reacted. So he's all about this theory. He's all about how we learn and our social context and how we think and stuff. So this theory of personality emphasizes the interaction between our traits and our situations, like the nature. So the whole, again, it's the whole nature nurture debate. So like our traits, which are nature, and nurture, which is our situation or the environment that we're in. They theorize that we learn through conditioning and observation. That kind of, remember, goes back to learning, which is where Bandura is from, and imitation, which is the social part. But then he also puts the cognitive part, which is our thinking, our feelings, our mental processes. That's our cognition and stuff. So it kind of looks at the importance of both of those, which is why it's both words hyphenated. So he comes up with something called reciprocal determinism, which is the interaction with the influences of our behavior, our internal cognition, and our environment. And so there was a picture, this picture was in your book, talking about the interpersonal factors, and they interact with our environment, which interacts with our behavior, which interacts with our internal personal factors, and they're all, related. Also talks about in your book how there's this gene environment interaction, and like when our genetically influenced traits evoke certain responses from others, like we may get pushed more in one direction or something like that. We've talked about this. You've seen this picture in nearly every unit slides at some point, the biopsychosocial approach. There's the biopsychosocial approach to everything: learning, cognition, development, and personality. And so you'll see it with motivation and emotion too. But remember, there's the 3 parts. There's the bio part with the biological influences. So like your genetics that determine your temperament, your nervous system, your brain activity. Your psychological influences go into your personality, like the responses you've learned, your unconscious thought processes, expectations you have, how you interpret stuff, and then your sociocultural influences, which is your environment, your childhood experiences, the situation you're in, the expectations of your culture for like your gender, your age, or whatever, and the social support you have. So the social cognitive theory falls into that biopsychosocial. It's very similar to that and kind of showing us their impact on personality. So the social cognitive theory relies on real life scenarios more than paper pencil tests. Like they don't look at like judging your temperament by taking an inventory or something like that. They've found that the best means of predicting future behavior is looking at past behavior in a similar situation. So if you want to know what they're going to do, what someone's going to do in the future in this situation, look at how they act in the past in that situation. And I know people can change and yada, 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 but let's be real. 9 times out of 10, how you acted in the past in that situation will probably be how you act again in the future in it. Critics of this, though, claim that the social cognitive theory relies, that should be the word, relies, I'll fix that, relies too much on the situation and not enough on the person's inner traits. So here is a chart of all the approaches to personality. We talked about psychoanalytic with Freud, and everything, psychodynamic, and that was like the neo-Freudians and stuff. We moved into humanistic with Rogers and Maslow. Then we looked at traits with all those personality inventories. And now we're ending with social cognitive with Bandura and how he feels. You do not have to write all this down, but it's definitely a good reference that you would want to like really read and look at the differences and make sure you can identify the differences between all the different approaches to personality. Again, one's not right or wrong. It's just the lens in which you view personality. Your personality, my personality, his, hers. If you were a psychologist treating someone, your client's personality, like how do you view that? Like where did it come from? How can you help them with it, solve problems, stuff like that? And again, you can't say one's right or wrong. It's just kind of people fall into their own, kind of category for it. So the last part of the notes didn't really have to deal with that, which is why I made it its own section, which is the self. So psychologists have always been pretty concerned with people's sense of self ever since William James wrote about it in the first psych textbook back in 1890. He wrote over 100 pages about the self in it. So this has been a pretty core concept since the beginning of psychology. In contemporary psychology nowadays, it's believed to be the center of our personality, the organizer of our thoughts, our feelings, our actions. That's the self. That's you, right? But it can lead to problems too. So there's this term to make sure you get down and write down, the spotlight effect, which is when we are so concerned on the self, we actually overestimate. And we've all done this. We all think like, oh my God, I'm walking in, looking a certain way, having a certain things. Everybody's going to notice my earrings or my shoes or my this or my that. And like people don't notice it, because if you stop and think of all the times you've been self-conscious as to how you look, you're like, oh, somebody's going to notice my belt or something little. But then think of all the people you interact with on a day. Do you notice little things on every single person that you pass in the hallway, that you sit beside in class, this, that, and the other? Like you don't. Like you have no idea what shoes they walked in with. Or, if they were like so self-conscious about their t-shirt, you didn't even look at it or something like that. So that's the spotlight effect. We overestimate others noticing us and evaluating us, especially our appearance, our performance, and our blunders. But really people don't. Like you get up and talk and you think people notice every mistake you make, how nervous you are, and this, that, and the other. But they don't. I mean, sometimes some people do, but for the most part, most people don't. They just like take the whole thing in. They're like, oh, you were wearing that weird shirt or something? Like, oh, I didn't even care. Like, I didn't think it was that weird or wasn't a big deal. Whereas the person inside wearing it's like freaking out or something. So it's like having a spotlight on us when really it's not. People don't notice us like we think we do. Like we think they do. Also, how we feel about ourselves is very important. So self-esteem and self-efficacy. So you know what self-esteem probably is, but here's your definition to write down. It's your feelings of high or low self-worth. And then self-efficacy is similar, but a little bit different. So it's how competent we think we are, how effective we think we are, how good we think we are. And it looks like I'm missing stuff on that. Hold on, let me pull it up because I think we need it. It looks like there's stuff down there. Let me make these spaces littler. Oh no, it was just me trying to type something that didn't end up being anything. Okay, never mind. Want to make sure you weren't missing out on any words. All right, so let's see. So people with high self-esteem and high self-efficacy tend to have less anxiety overall. They tend to conform less to like the pressures of other people or pressures of the world. They tend to be more positive and overall more happy people. Those who are more negative about themselves have lower self-esteem, lower self-efficacy, tend to be excessively critical of themselves, excessively critical of others, unhappy overall, and negative and stuff like that. So basically, it's the thought of like you accept yourself and you'll find it easier to accept others. Excessive optimism, though, isn't always a good thing. Like your book talks about it, like too much of anything isn't good for you, and it can blind us to the reality of the world, to the risk of the world, to other people, to bad situations, to things we shouldn't do because we're just like way too optimistic. And that's not good either. I mean, you shouldn't set yourself up for risk or failures or be taken advantage of or something like that. There's also a risk of being blind to your own incompetence. Like there's the old saying, like you don't know what you don't know, but that doesn't help you in life if you don't know what you don't know. It can sustain our self-confidence, which could lead us to make like the same mistakes over and over because we don't know what we don't know. If you're doing the wrong thing, that's not good. We tend to have a good reputation with ourselves. Ourself tends to think pretty highly about ourselves. Most people do. And that could lead to like the self-serving bias, which is a readiness to perceive ourselves favorably. So like your book talks about it. It's so crazy, okay? It's like take all these things like the average student, the average son, the average daughter, the average friend, the average boyfriend, the average girlfriend, right? And you say, how would you rate yourself? Like above average, average, or below average? And most people rate themselves above average. Like I'm above average. Like think of all the daughters in the world. I'm pretty awesome. I'm at 75%. Or all the boyfriends in the world, all the students in the world, or all of this. And everyone's always rating themselves above average, but you know how it works. Like that's not how the numbers add up. Like no one's rating themselves at like 33%, but someone's in the 33rd percentile, someone's in the 16th percentile. You know what I'm saying? Like most of us are average. We're in the middle, 40 to 60 and stuff like that. And it's just so interesting that if everyone says they're above average, then that's average. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just really interesting. We also tend to accept more responsibility for good than bad. For our successes, we take more responsibility, but if there's a failure, it's like some other reason or someone else's fault or something else. And we, like I said, see themselves better than average. You should go read about that in your book. It's really cool, all the different things they were talking about with it. These findings are more prominent in Western cultures over Eastern Asian cultures that value modesty, whereas Western cultures value individualism and success more. Eastern cultures, like Asian cultures, is more harmonious, the group, modest, not stand out, that type of thing. We can relate to group dynamics of social psychology, such as things like group pride. And if you look at things like song lyrics, this is really interesting. Your book talked about too. You should go read this too. Song lyrics, books, and even just goals in life, they are way more self-focused than they were years before, even in the 80s or 90s, but definitely more than the 50s or 60s, which is way more than the 20s and even more before. Like if you read like all these books, like they're all about the self. And if you listen to all these song lyrics, it's all about you and like you doing what you want to do. And you watch all these movies and look at the plot and it's about the person doing that. And it's just kind of interesting how we've evolved, especially in American culture, into more of a self-serving role and stuff like that. The self is way more important. All right, narcissism. So we talked about this some with narcissistic personality disorder, with the personality disorders that we did last unit, but it's excessive self-love, excessive self-absorption. Like I said, it comes from like the Greek nymph Narcissus, who sat on the side of a pond and loved the way he looked, thought he was the most beautiful thing ever, leaned in, loved his own reflection, stared at it, got so close that he fell in the water and drowned. And it was like his own love for himself killed him. You know, he had too much love for himself, he drowned in it. So that's what narcissism means. And there is a correlation with increased narcissism today and increased desires of self. And like things like materialism are more important today, fame, wealth, power, and people are more narcissistic today. And they're less concerned about others, the group, harmony, helping people, stuff like that. But if that's the case, what about all those people who feel worthless or unlovable? If we all love ourselves, right? What about those people who disparage themselves and stuff? Usually that's due to one of four reasons as to why someone would fall into this category. One, it's strategic. They want to get sympathy. They want someone to tell them, oh no, you are smart or pretty or nice or whatever, you know, to like get those compliments and stuff. Or they're preparing for the worst. Maybe they think if I disparage myself, then and say I might fail the test, and if I fail the test, I won't be as upset. They're learning from past mistakes. They say, you know, oh, I'm so dumb because they did things and they like can't get over it or something like that. Or they're saying it pertains to their old self. Like I used to be this person, you know, but I'm not anymore. I don't want to be that person anymore. But since there's both, psychologists look at two types of self-esteem. There's defensive self-esteem and secure self-esteem. So defensive self-esteem is the sustaining one. It's sustaining itself, its failure is threatening, and it feels vulnerable. So it's kind of like the good one, or it's the bad one, sorry. The good one is secure self-esteem. It's less contingent on the external. It's more contingent and it's more focused on the internal and how you feel about yourself, not how the world feels about you. And person feels accepted for who they are and stuff. And so that's pretty much it. I ended with this pretty cool quote I found in your book from psychologists Robert McRae and Paul Costa, who did a personality inventory. And they said, a person's recognition of the inevitability of his or her one and only personality is the culminating wisdom of a lifetime. Because your personality is not going to change. You know what I'm saying? Like it remains pretty stable. And so that's the you that you're stuck with for now until eternity. And once you really get to recognize, love, appreciate that, and kind of hone in on that and take your gifts, it's the culminating wisdom of a lifetime and can lead to much success. Personality, people's temperament can be a much bigger indicator of success than a lot of other factors. So anyways, that was it with personality. Hope you enjoyed that unit or that part of this unit, and I will see you guys later. Bye.